Daniel Harper here. Something just shifted in the global defense landscape, and most people haven't grasped how big it is yet. Canada has aligned itself with Europe's massive new defense financing framework, a program worth up to $150 billion. And for the first time in decades, future Canadian military procurement may no longer default to Washington. This isn't just about weapons contracts, it's about supply chains, industrial power, NATO dynamics, and whether the United States remains the automatic center of Western defense manufacturing. If you appreciate deep, strategic breakdowns of the moves reshaping global alliances, hit that like button and subscribe. Because what looks like procurement policy on the surface can quietly redefine geopolitical leverage for a generation. Now let's unpack what's happening and why it matters. Breaking news that just stunned Washington. Canada has officially joined the European Union's €150 billion weapons program. And the United States is completely locked out. Not as an observer, not as a consultant, as a full participant, the only non-European country with access to the entire Security Action for Europe program. Joint procurement, weapons development, defense financing, submarine technology, cyber warfare systems, all being built with Europe instead of being purchased from the United States. Mark Carney signed the agreement in February 2026. Canada is now inside the tent. That is the phrase Defense Minister David McGuinty used. We have been allowed to step inside the European Union tent, allowed to participate like no other non-European state, negotiate our way into very large opportunities for procurement that the United States cannot touch. This is not a trade deal. This is Canada redirecting billions of dollars in future military spending away from American defense contractors and toward European manufacturers. This is Ottawa building the next generation of Canadian submarines with France and Germany instead of buying American. This is the largest strategic realignment in Canadian defense policy since NATO was created. And it happened because Trump spent a year threatening Canada's sovereignty while Europe offered partnership. Today, we are showing you what Security Action for Europe actually does, how Canada became the only country outside Europe with full access, why this fundamentally changes NATO's internal dynamics, and how the program is designed specifically to function even if the United States abandons the alliance. But before we dive into this story, if you appreciate in-depth analysis like this, hit that like button and subscribe to stay informed on the stories that truly matter. So what Security Action for Europe actually is? Security Action for Europe is the European Union's answer to a problem that has existed since NATO was founded. European militaries are weak because they depend on the United States for everything. Fighter jets from the United States, missiles from the United States, radar systems from the United States, intelligence sharing controlled by the United States, ammunition stockpiles that run out in weeks because European factories closed decades ago and production moved to America. Russia's invasion of Ukraine exposed how dangerous that dependence had become. European countries committed to massive defense spending increases, but they realized that just buying more American equipment was not a strategy. It was trading one dependency for another. If the United States decides European security is not a priority, all that American-made equipment becomes worthless without American support, American parts, American maintenance. Security Action for Europe solves that problem through coordinated rearmament. 150 billion euros in loans specifically for defense purchases. But the money comes with rules. Joint procurement. At least 60% of components produced within European Union territory. Weapons designed to European specifications, not American specifications. Defense industries built in Poland and Romania and France, not outsourced to American contractors. Poland has been allocated $43.7 billion, Romania $16.6 billion, Hungary and France $16.2 billion each. The money finances everything from artillery shells to submarine production, to artificial intelligence-enabled cyber warfare systems. The genius of the program is that it is not just about weapons. It is about building a European defense industrial base that does not depend on American supply chains. Every euro spent creates manufacturing capacity in Europe. Every contract awarded to a European company is a contract that does not go to an American defense contractor. Every weapon system developed under security action for Europe is designed to work with European allies, not to require American integration. And now Canada is inside that system, building weapons with Europe, buying equipment through European procurement channels, developing technology that is compatible with European militaries instead of exclusively compatible with the United States. Okay, so how Canada became the only non-European member? Getting into security action for Europe was not automatic. The European Union designed the program for European Union members. The 65% European content rule was specifically meant to keep the money inside Europe and build European industrial capacity. The United Kingdom tried to negotiate access. Australia started talks, but Canada got in first, and Canada got in as a full participant, not as a limited observer. Carney signed the initial security and defense partnership with the European Union in June 2025. That agreement laid the groundwork. It established that Canada and Europe would cooperate on cybersecurity, maritime security, space security, and joint weapons procurement. It signaled that Canada was serious about reducing dependence on the United States and building alternative defense relationships. But the security and defense partnership was not the same as security action for Europe membership. The partnership was a political framework. Security action for Europe is a financing and procurement mechanism with real money and real contracts. Getting into security action for Europe required separate negotiations. Those negotiations concluded in December 2025. The formal agreement was signed in February 2026. Canada is now officially a participant. Canadian defense companies can bid on contracts financed by the €150 billion fund. Canada can join joint procurement groups with European countries to buy submarines, missiles, radar systems, anything the Canadian military needs. And Canadian companies can sell to European militaries through the same procurement channels. The entrance fee was not disclosed. Defense Minister McGuinty said it would be in the millions, not billions. That tells you the European Union wanted Canada inside the program. If Europe was charging billions for access, Canada would have negotiated harder or walked away. Millions is a symbolic fee, a cost small enough that it signals Europe views Canada as a strategic partner, not as a customer. Why did Europe want Canada in? Because Canada brings things Europe needs: advanced maritime surveillance technology, Arctic expertise, cyber capabilities, rare earth minerals, and critical mineral deposits that European defense industries need for electronics and batteries. And most importantly, Canada brings a message to Washington. Europe does not need to be exclusively dependent on the United States for defense cooperation. There are alternatives. What Canada gets that the United States does not? The practical impact of security action for Europe membership shows up in procurement. Canada is replacing its submarine fleet. The Canadian Patrol Submarine Project is one of the largest defense acquisitions in Canadian history. Canada currently operates Victoria-class submarines purchased from the United Kingdom in the 1990s. They are old, they are expensive to maintain, and they are not capable of operating under Arctic ice, which is increasingly important as the Northwest Passage becomes navigable. Canada needs new submarines. The question has always been where to buy them. The United States builds submarines. So does France. So does Germany. So does Sweden. Each country builds to different specifications. Each requires different supply chains. Each comes with different levels of technology, transfer, and domestic production. Before security action for Europe, Canada's default option was to buy American or negotiate with individual European countries separately. Now Canada can join a European joint procurement group. France and Germany are developing a next-generation submarine design. Canada can participate in that development, ensure the submarines meet Canadian Arctic requirements, and get technology transfer that allows Canadian shipyards to build or maintain the submarines domestically. That approach saves money through economies of scale. It ensures interoperability with European NATO allies, and it builds Canadian industrial capacity instead of just buying foreign equipment. The same logic applies to cyber warfare systems. Canada is integrating into European cyber defense supply chains. Artificial intelligence-enabled electronic warfare, underwater surveillance sensors, systems designed to detect and counter threats in ways that are compatible with European military networks, not exclusively designed around American systems. This does not mean Canada is abandoning the United States entirely. Canada still operates American fighter jets. Canadian and American forces still train together. The NORAD agreement is still in place, but the direction is clear. Future procurement will be more diversified, less dependence on American contractors, more integration with European suppliers, and the United States cannot bid on security action for Europe contracts. American defense companies are locked out. If a European country uses security action for Europe financing to buy radar systems, American companies cannot compete for that contract. The 65% European content rule excludes them. Every euro spent through security action for Europe is a euro that does not go to an American defense contractor. Canada joining the program means Canadian procurement dollars that used to go to the United States will increasingly go to European companies instead. 75% of Canadian military equipment purchases have historically been American. That number is about to drop. Maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but over the next decade, as Canada replaces submarines and upgrades cyber capabilities and modernizes its military, more of that spending will flow through security action for Europe, and less will go to American contractors. What American defense contractors are losing? Canada spends approximately 15 billion Canadian dollars per year on defense. 75% of equipment purchases historically went to American companies. Over 11 billion annually to American defense contractors. Now consider security action for Europe, shifting even 30% of that procurement to European suppliers, $3 billion per year, leaving American companies. Over a decade, 30 billion in lost contracts. Over a submarine program's lifetime, 50 billion or more. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, General Dynamics treated Canada as a captive market. The default was always American equipment, NORAD compatibility, NATO interoperability, easier to buy American than negotiate with European suppliers separately. Security action for Europe changes everything. European procurement is coordinated. Joining European joint groups gives Canada bulk pricing and technology transfer. Interoperability with European NATO allies now matters as much as American compatibility, and there is political imperative to diversify. The submarine contract alone could be 20 to 30 billion. If that goes to a French-German consortium instead of American builders, that is 20 to 30 billion American shipyards do not get next-generation cyber warfare systems developed with Europe instead of America. Several billion more in lost revenue. The impact extends beyond direct procurement. American defense companies built entire supply chains, assuming Canada buys American component manufacturers, maintenance contractors, training programs, all less valuable when Canada shifts to Europe. Jobs in American defense manufacturing depend on export contracts. Canada has been reliable revenue for decades. That reliability is ending and it spreads. If Canada succeeds using security action for Europe to build military capability outside American industrial base, others notice. Australia already in talks with Europe. Japan interested. South Korea exploring options. American contractors could compete with better terms, more technology transfer, joint development, lower prices. But the 65% European content rule locks them out. They can sell to Canada outside security action for Europe, but they cannot compete for the 150 billion euro funds, contracts. As that fund grows, the locked-out market grows. Why this changes NATO's internal dynamics? NATO has always had an imbalance. The United States provides the majority of military capability. European countries provide territory and political support. That imbalance gave Washington enormous leverage. If European countries did not align with American priorities, the United States could threaten to reduce its commitment to European defense. Trump has made that threat explicit. He has questioned whether the United States should remain in NATO. He has suggested that European countries are not paying their fair share. He has used the threat of American withdrawal as leverage to pressure European allies on trade, on China policy, on everything. Security action for Europe is Europe's answer. If the United States is not a reliable partner, Europe needs to be capable of defending itself without American support. That requires a European defense industrial base. That requires European weapons production. That requires stockpiles of ammunition and missiles that do not depend on American resupply. Canada joining security action for Europe adds a new dimension. Canada is a North American country, a founding NATO member, a country that has fought alongside the United States in every major conflict since the Second World War. And Canada is now building its military capacity through European procurement channels instead of American ones. That sends a message to other NATO members. You do not need to choose between NATO and reducing dependence on the United States. You can be a committed NATO ally and still diversify your defense relationships. Canada is proving it is possible. It also changes the internal politics of NATO. If the United States threatens to reduce its commitment, European countries in Canada can point to security action for Europe and say, "We are already building the capability to manage without you." That leverage did not exist 5 years ago. It exists now, and it will only grow stronger as security action for Europe financing produces actual weapons, actual industrial capacity, actual alternatives to American equipment. Some analysts argue this could weaken NATO by creating a European pillar that competes with American leadership. Others argue it strengthens NATO by making European members more capable and less dependent on the United States, bailing them out. Both are probably true, but the direction is clear. NATO is becoming less American-dominated and more balanced between American and European capabilities, and Canada is aligning with the European side of that balance. Security action for Europe is not an isolated decision. It is part of a pattern: the China trade deal, the Luxembourg financial partnership, the Hudson Bay Railway, the Gordie Howe Bridge, the fertilizer deals with Brazil and India. Every move Carney has made since taking office follows the same logic: build alternatives that reduce dependence on the United States. Trump views this as betrayal. Canada making a deal with China. Canada building defense relationships with Europe. Canada investing in Arctic infrastructure that bypasses American ports. Every move is framed as Canada abandoning its closest ally. But Carney is not abandoning anyone. Carney is building insurance. Insurance against American unpredictability. Insurance against a president who threatens to annex Canada 1 week and demands trade concessions the next. Insurance against the possibility that the United States decides Canadian sovereignty is negotiable. The European Union understands this. That is why Europe wanted Canada inside security action for Europe, because Europe is building the same insurance against the same unpredictability. If the United States is not a reliable partner, Europe and Canada need alternatives. Those alternatives work better if they work together. The pattern is deliberate. Every partnership Canada builds makes unilateral American pressure less effective. Trump can threaten tariffs. Canada can shift trade to China and Europe. Trump can threaten to block defense cooperation. Canada can build weapons with France and Germany. Trump can threaten NATO withdrawal. Canada and Europe can point to security action for Europe and say NATO will function without you. This is not about choosing Europe over the United States. This is about ensuring Canada has options when the United States becomes unreliable. And the United States under Trump has been profoundly unreliable. Security action for Europe is just beginning. The initial 150 billion euros is mostly allocated, but the European Union is negotiating the next multi-year fiscal framework. Another 5 years of defense financing, potentially hundreds of billions more euros. Canada is positioned for that next wave. Canadian companies can now bid on European contracts. Canadian officials join European working groups designing next-generation weapons. Canadian requirements integrated from the start, not modified later. The submarine project is the test case. If successful, other procurement follows. Fighter jets, missiles, cyber systems, all with European partners instead of American. Technology transfer matters here. When Canada buys American, the United States keeps the intellectual property. Canada gets weapons. America keeps manufacturing capability. Security action for Europe transfers technology. Canadian engineers work with French and German engineers. Canadian shipyards learn to build systems. Knowledge stays in Canada. This creates jobs, manufacturing, engineering, research. When Canada bought American jets, benefits went to American factories. When Canada develops through security action for Europe, Canadian and European workers build them. Money stays instead of flowing to America. Strategic implications compound. Every year, more European procurement means less American. Over a decade, billions shift. American contractors lose revenue. European contractors gain. Canada gains industrial capacity. But the biggest impact is political. Security action for Europe proves NATO allies can build capability without American contractors. For 70 years, European security meant American military superiority. That gave Washington leverage. If Europe and Canada can build submarines, jets, missiles, cyber capabilities matching American systems, that assumption breaks. NATO becomes less American-led, more genuine partnership. The deal that stunned Washington is not a one-time event. It is a long-term realignment. Canada building defense with Europe, reducing dependence on the United States, proving NATO functions even if America deprioritizes European security. Carney said it explicitly. In a dangerous and divided world, Canada and Europe are elevating defense partnerships to rapidly procure new equipment, accelerate NATO targets, and catalyze opportunities for defense manufacturers. Notice what is missing. The United States. No American cooperation, no American leadership, just Canada and Europe. Defense Minister McGuinty was more direct. Security action for Europe unlocks unprecedented opportunities for Canadian manufacturers to build what our allies need and what our forces rely on. Building, not buying what America sells. Building. That word choice is deliberate. Canada transitions from customer to partner in European production. Implications for Washington are profound. For 70 years, Canada was America's most reliable ally. Always aligned in NATO. Always bought American equipment, never questioned American leadership. That era ends. Not because Canada wants confrontation, because Trump made partnership impossible. You cannot threaten annexation 1 week and expect compliance the next. Cannot impose punitive tariffs and expect cooperation on defense. Cannot mock sovereignty and expect priority for American interests. Trump thought pressure would bring Canada into line. The opposite happened. Pressure pushed Canada into partnerships. making American pressure irrelevant. Canada is inside the European tent. The United States is outside. That arrangement is exactly what Washington's threats produced. Trump wanted control, got independence, wanted submission, got defiance, wanted Canada more dependent, got Canada building alternatives, making American cooperation optional. Security action for Europe is the result. 50 billion European financing, Canadian companies on European contracts, Canadian submarines with French-German technology, Canadian cyber systems with European networks, all without American involvement, all proving NATO allies can build capability without American contractors. Not what Trump intended. Exactly what Trump's strategy produced, and just getting started.